Scorched Earth.
What's up everyone, it's Blue here at Blue Bears Games, and today I will be showing you the third 60-card budget battle brew that I recently built and added to my inventory of decks for sale on my Facebook page and on the Facebook Marketplace. As a reminder, these are budget-friendly decks that I make and sell for people either just starting out or looking for a fun and unique deck to play with their friends and family. So if you're in the market for a fun deck to play for your next gathering, head on over to my Facebook page, which is linked in the description, after you're done watching this video. I have named today's deck Scorched Earth, and as I said in last week's video, it uses the landfall ability in a somewhat unique way. Normally, I see landfall used to either create tokens, buff creatures, or to facilitate a combo, but for this deck, it's actually the main way of dealing damage. The landfall mechanic is one of my favorite abilities in the game because it rewards you for doing something you need to do anyway, so my natural inclination was to figure out a way to make it do the other thing you want to do in the game, which is to win. So let's get started, and I'll show you just how I went about putting this theme together on a budget. So the creatures for this deck are going to look absolutely absurd. They're not going to be anything you're used to seeing from any build I've done, or probably anything that competitive builders do, but it will all make sense once you finish going through the entire deck. I start off with an Oshra Cultivator. It's a 1-cast 0/3 that has the ability to pay 3 and tap and sack it to go search your library for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield tapped. The reason why I like this over a lot of other 1-drops is because it is an 0/3, and while you're trying to set up your win cons, it can help block some of those lower cost, very low power creatures that can overwhelm the board. So I put 4 of them in there because it's basically like having a wall while you set up. And then later, you can sacrifice it when you don't need it anymore to actually get your win con going. For them, Groundskeeper is a very odd card. In most cases, it doesn't really help a whole lot, but this deck was centered around the theory that this can help. So it's a 1-cast 1/1 that for each 2 you put into it, you can return a basic land card from your graveyard to your hand. And I will have some stuff in here that will actually show you that you will have basic lands in your graveyard. So it will be very useful for additional land drops later when you don't have a land in your hand. I got 2 of them in there because it's actually not as important to have them as it is the other stuff. All the rest of the green creatures are going to go and grab lands from your library and put them in your hand. So Sylvan Ranger is a 2-cast 1/1. It'll grab a basic land from your library, put it in your hand, so you can play it later. I got 4 of them in there. You just want as many lands in your hand that you can play, or at least put them into play as possible. Borderland Ranger is a 30-cast 2/2 that does it. So it says it enters the battlefield, you search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it in your hand, and then shuffle. That's how it's worded. 4 of them. And then the WinCon creatures. They're all going to have a similar ability. To Tunneling Geopede. It is a 3-cast 3/2 with a landfall ability that says whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So keep that in mind because the next 2 creatures that I'm going to show you are going to have something similar. I got 2 Tunneling Geopedes in here for now. I got 4 Kosi's Ravagers. They are 4-cast 2/2s that again have landfall that says whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may have it deal 1 damage to target player. It's not each opponent, but if you're playing a 60-card deck, it's going to be 1-on-1, so you're going to do it to your opponent. And then Spitfire Lagok is a 40-cast 3/4 with landfall that says whenever land enters the battlefield under control, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So you can see what I mean here. The synergy here is that all of your stuff that doesn't do what the Spitfire does or the Kosi's Ravager, it goes and gets a land and puts it either in your hand or into play directly, so that when you do play it, if it's in your hand, you can start dealing massive amounts of damage to your opponents, and that's your win con. There's one more creature in here. It's actually Akoum Hellkite. It has a similar ability to the Spitfire Lagok and the Kosi's Ravager. It's 6-cast for a 4/4 flyer. Its landfall ability is whenever land enters the battlefield under control, Akoum Hellkite will deal 1 damage to target creature or player, but if the land was a mountain, it deals 2 damage instead. So it's actually a better version of the landfall ability that the Spitfire Lagok has or the Kosi's Ravager, except for this one's a little more expensive to cast. The non-creatures in this deck will help you go get lands. They will help you put lands, stuff into your hand, all that stuff, so I'll just show you what I got. Start off with 4 Relentless Pursuits. It's a 30-cast sorcery that says reveal the top 4 cards of your library, and then you may put a creature and or a land from among them into your hand and put the rest into your graveyard. Remember that I have the card that returns basic lands from your graveyard to your hand. This is the first of the 2 that will put some type of lands possibly into your graveyard. This is the second one. It's Harrow. It's a 3-cast instant, so keep that in mind. It's an instant. As an additional cost to play Harrow, you have to sacrifice a land, so that's where the land will go into your graveyard and you can get it back later. Then you search your library for up to 2 basic land cards and put them into play, not tapped. That's important. You can put them into play, not tapped. So you can destroy a tapped land to put 2 lands that are not tapped into play. And then you shuffle, of course. So I got 4 of them in there. Next up is Dire Strain Rampage. This is actually quite a bit interesting. It's kind of like the crop rotation. Or Harrow, sorry. I used Harrow instead of crop rotation. You can use that as well. It is a 3-cast sorcery that you can destroy target artifact, enchantment, or land, and if a land was destroyed this way, its controller may search their library for up to 2 basic land cards and put them onto the battlefield tapped and then shuffle. Otherwise, its controller may search their library for a basic land and put it onto the battlefield tapped. Then it has flashbacks. So the cool thing about this is you can either target your own lands, so you can get more lands into play to cause more damage from your landfall effects, or it can be used defensively
to destroy somebody else's, one of your opponent's artifacts or enchantments that may be locking you down. So it's good either offensively or defensively. So it's a great card, and that's why I included it in there. Plus, it has flashback, which means you can do it more than once. The next one is Valakut Exploration. It is a 3 to cast enchantment with another landfall ability that says whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you exile the top card of your library, and you may play that card as long as it remains exiled. And the reason why they use the term play it is because you can play lands from the exile with this card. Then it says at the beginning of your end step, if there are cards exiled with Valakut Exploration, put them into their owner's graveyard, and then Valakut Exploration will deal that much damage to each opponent. So it can deal some damage to your opponents if you couldn't play the card. So say, for instance, this is the time it would have that, is if you flipped over a land, because you already played a land, you can't play it again, so it'll end up in your graveyard. So again, synergy-wise, this is another way that lands can end up in your graveyard, and then you can get them back later. So it's a great card overall. Last card is a Saga. It is a 6 to cast Saga, and the way Sagas work is you cast it and you put it into play, and the first chapter will happen. So for this one, it's destroy target land, and then on your next upkeep, the second chapter will hit. For this one, it is put target land card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. And here's the cool thing: this can target your opponent's land to put them into play under your control. And then the third chapter, which happens again on the upkeep after the second chapter went off, is that you choose target opponent, and if they control fewer lands than you do, you create a number of 4/4. What are they? Green Troll Warrior creature tokens with trample equal to the difference in lands that you control more than they do. So if you control 5 lands and they control, I'm sorry, it would have to be 6 because it's 6 to cast. So say if you control 6 lands and they control 4, you would create 2 of those. If you control 7 lands and they control 3, you would create 4 of them, and so on. So whatever the difference between the two is, as long as you control more, you create that many 4/4 tokens with trample. As far as the lands go, again, I like to keep it simple so that people can learn how to play the game with these decks. It's 2-color deck, so we go with Rugged Highlands. It comes into play tapped, but it taps to add a green or red, which is the 2 colors of the deck, and then when it enters the battlefield, you gain a life. So I always put these kind of lands in there. I put 4 of them in there for dual-color decks because it helps gain life for you, and then, it helps mana fix. The rest of the deck is basic forests and basic mountains because that's the 2 colors of the deck, and I think I actually have 20 basics. I think it's 10 forests and 10 mountains because this is a landfall deck, and the more lands you can put into play, the better the chances that you'll be able to beat your opponent is. So I will have again, as always, in the description, I will have the deck list so you can double check me though.
Now let me show you a couple of cards you can swap in to improve how this deck plays, starting with the creatures. The one drop that I included, Oshra Cultivator, is great because it's 3 toughness, which makes it a great blocker early game and then a land fetcher later when they may not be as useful. However, they will never be able to deal combat damage to a player later if the situation arises. This leads me to suggest possibly switching it out for a card named Elvish Reclaimer. The Reclaimer starts out as a 1/2, so its toughness is a point lower, but it has a power of 1, and it has a self buff that can make it a 3/4 later for doing what this deck wants to do, which is put lands into play. Even better is that it can fetch a land card and not just a basic land. Depending on what you do with the land base could help determine which one you choose to go with. Elvish Reclaimers also benefit from the Groundkeeper's ability of getting lands back from the grave, which is a good reason to keep those in the deck. It also depends on what you choose to do with the land base, which I'll go over in just a bit. The 2-drop is tricky because Sylvan Ranger does mostly what you want. The issue is it only puts a land into your hand and not into play, and it's only a 1/1. The options at 2 mana are vastly different in what they do, and sadly none are perfect. Some can put a land into play, but at a cost that could be higher than you're willing to pay, and I'm not just talking about mana cost either. Some require a discard, some require a sacrifice, and some require a lot of mana to activate. Of the options available, my suggestions to upgrade this slot would be Frontier Guide. It's still only a 1/1, but at least later in the game you can fetch a land and put it directly into play for the least painful price. My thought process is, if the rest of your deck is focused on putting land into play, the 4 mana to activate its ability should be negligible. For the 3-drop, I would swap out the Borderland Rangers for Topiary Stompers. The Stomper puts the land into play instead of in your hand, which is nice, and its downside of not being able to attack or block shouldn't be an issue really since the theme is to get lands into play anyway. Being a 4/4 with Vigilance for 3 mana isn't too shabby either. On the 4-drop side, I would drop 2 Kosi's Ravagers for 2 more Tunneling Geopedes, since they are cheaper to cast, have an extra power, and deal the damage to each opponent rather than the target player. The last part only matters if you're playing multiplayer, but the first 2 reasons are more important anyway. I'd also drop the other 2 Ravagers for 2 copies of Ancient Green Warden. Yes, the Green Warden costs 2 more to cast, but the ability to play lands from the grave fits well in this deck, and getting double triggers from your landfall guys could be the difference between winning and losing. On top of that, a 5/7 body with reach is a much better body than a 2/2 Groundwalker for 2 extra mana. As for the lone Akoum Hellkite, you can leave it in if you like, since it is extra damage from the landfall effect, and that's the point of the deck. But I believe that if you swapped it out for an Ashaya Soul of the Wild, you'll get more landfall triggers overall, which could end up being way more useful than the Hellkite in the long run. Now let's look at some non-creature stuff that could help improve this deck. I would swap out the Harrows for Rampant Growths. They are cheaper to cast and don't require you to sack a land to cast them. I know they only get 1 land versus 2, but sometimes sacking a land won't be beneficial, while always being able to get a land into play with no drawbacks will be. I would also swap the Relentless Pursuits out for Gifts of the Gargantuans, because they do the same thing, except the Gift of Gargantuan lets you put those cards that you didn't choose back on the bottom of your library instead of your graveyard. And the last suggestion that I'll give for this section will be to swap out the Dire Strain Rampage and the Wakening the Trolls to swap in 2 Druid classes. The life gain and ability to play extra lands a turn are both very helpful to this deck's theme. The life gain can help you stay alive long enough to set up, and naturally being able to play extra lands every turn is great for a landfall-based theme. I would have added them to begin with, but I didn't have any in my collection to do so, sadly. The last part of this small guide is about the lands. Naturally, you'll want to swap out the Rugged Highlands for lands that don't enter play tapped. Sure, you could spend big bucks for the OG dual lands or even shock lands, but I've always said I'm a budget guy, and 2 lands exist that are less painful to your wallet and your life total. Rootbound Crag and Rockfall Vale are both more budget-friendly options, and in a deck like this, their requirement to enter play untapped should be met easily, making them great options to upgrade your land base. You can choose to add either a set of 1 or both, and it wouldn't hurt either the deck or your wallet. What could hurt your wallet, though, is you could choose to add the true fetch land Wooded Foothills, but that's up to you and your budget restrictions. They do advance the theme of this deck greatly, though, so if you want to add them, just swap out some basics for them. There you have it, my friends, my new and original 60-card budget battle brew that I call Scorched Earth. This deck requires some setup to get going, but once you do, it takes off like a rocket. It's also quite fun to play since it's different from your normal Gruul deck that only wants to turn creatures sideways and go burr. I've always been a fan of doing something different, and this deck is just one of many that I've created over the years. So that's all I've got for you this week, but next week I will be returning back to Budget Commander goodness with a custom ordered deck. I will be going over a 3-color deck, which I don't get to do very often on this channel, so be sure to check back for that. It's definitely a popular commander, so you won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and as always,
If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or concerns, or you just want to talk about any of the videos I put out, you can do so using any of the methods I have displayed here. Additionally, if you would like to support the channel, you can do so in 3 ways. Donations are accepted and greatly appreciated. I have 3 methods with which you can do so displayed on the screen, and keep in mind that no amount is too small. If donations aren't your thing, and you would like to get something for your money, that's great too. I sell a lot of the decks I present on the channel, as well as mystery packs. So, if you're interested in any of these, you can contact me using the information I have on your screen right now. Directly contacting me is usually the best and cheapest way to do so, but you can always look at what I currently have available on the Facebook Marketplace. And lastly, if you want to show your love and support for the channel, but like myself, are a little strapped for cash, it doesn't cost you anything to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet, watch some videos and give them a like, and possibly share them out on your social medias you use to help spread my content to more people. No matter what way you choose is greatly appreciated and will help support the channel, and I thank you for it. Sadly, that is all the time I have for this video. Thank you for watching, and please, stick around and watch some of the many great videos I've posted over the last few years, and remember to check back again for new content I'll be posting every week. Have a great day.